Welcome to the conversation where we talk to professionals in the performing arts and entertainment industry. I am your host, Veronique George, and today I have the esteemed pleasure of talking with playwright Dr. James Webb.
Thank you so much, Veronique. It's so great to be here, and I'm honored that you invited me.
It's an honor to have you, Dr. Webb. As you know, I had the privilege of taking your acting classes and later working with you in your show, Sibling Rivalry. So this is a full circle moment for me right now. James, it's great to have you with us today. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm feeling good. I just bought a new house, so we're settling into the house. We started from scratch, so we're buying all new furniture, blinds,
Nice.
everything from scratch. And so the housing market has been a boom. But what people don't realize when they're buying houses, at least what I didn't realize, is that because so many houses are selling, that means there's delays in furniture, there's delays in setup, there's delays in appliances, there's all kind of delays. So it's coming together piece by piece. But it's been a journey, but a happy journey.
Good. Well, congratulations to you. Such
Thank
a great
you.
accomplishment and best of luck. I know furnishing a full entire house can be a lot of work. So
Oh yeah.
congratulations there and all the best.
Thank you. Thank you so
Well,
much.
my pleasure. If you are ready, let's get right into this conversation.
Let's do it.
All right. In 2020, we saw demonstrations of what our collective voices can do. Why is it important for diverse communities to come together to challenge the narrative?
Mm, I think that is important. Um, Simply because diversity is what it is. We are, one planet, all made by God, uh, in the image of God, in the likeness of God, by the love of God. And God has no respect of persons, which means we're all equal. God loves us all the same. And so we are all one, and we are one people. And that message of unity sometimes is smaller or less heard than the message of separation. And so identity politics comes into play. Uh, this side against this side, this color against this color. And so there's so much divisive talk, so much separation talk, but there does need to be a talk of unity. And speaking of unity doesn't necessarily mean that there's no accountability, that there are no standards, that even things like reparations shouldn't be paid. But we do need to remember what the ultimate thing is, and the ultimate thing is that we are one, and that's where we're heading to. And so, what one of the things that Paulo Freire says about the oppressed versus the oppressor is that when the oppressed take power, what they cannot do is they cannot use the same tactics of the oppressor. They have to teach the oppressor by showing them a thing that they haven't seen before. And that new thing can really only come from an oppressed people. And so I think that this is an exciting time, but I think all the great minds and the great thinkers that are out there do need to think about a new paradigm shift, a new way of looking at things. And I think first and foremost, unity and seeing the oneness in each of us has to be at the forefront of that conversation. And by having diverse people together to come together as one, that's a way that you can have multiple people in the room to be able to share ideas and have those great minds in the room. And it's not thinking on a monolith or thinking on a singular way. Um, I applaud anyone who's willing to get up and fight for what they believe in and for what's right. Uh, but as a person who is also an activist and an educator and an artist, I also believe in putting my voice out there. And my voice is continually trying to tell people that first and foremost, we need to see the spirituality of this thing. And that spirituality is trying to draw us to the oneness of who we are. And that is a oneness of a country, oneness of a nation, oneness of a whole world.
I love that. You can see that we've definitely taken steps in that direction, speaking to that oneness. Such an insightful answer. Thank you, Dr. Webb, for sure. Speaking of that, what does representation mean to you and why does it matter?
Representation means that you just have multiple people at the welcome table. being able to express ideas that are oftentimes could be in contrary of each other. You want rigorous discourse. You want a robust discussion, and that's what to me representation means. Oftentimes, in recent events, I'll take the theater for example. If we're looking at a show that may be on Broadway, that show is, and if it's a show of people of color, it's oftentimes a show that's mostly people of color. So it's like an all Black show, or it's the opposite where you have a token person, and that token person, that's what that is. That's tokenism, as opposed to considering and thinking about representation. Is that you want to have different ideas, different aesthetics, different points of view, different perspectives at the table. That's where you can have someone to catch the blind spots that you cannot see because of your own background and your own cultural values and your own sort of lens of the way that you view the world. You want other people to bounce those ideas off who come from different places. So that's what representation means to me.
I love that. Speaking of that, Dr. Webb, if you will allow me to call you that throughout our conversation, how do you take that same approach and apply that to your work, bringing all parties to the table so that you do catch those blind spots?
So please call me James. And what's interesting to me is, I can tell when I'm in the room if I'm comfortable. So I can tell if I'm comfortable with the person. Mm-hmm. And generally what that means is that their ideas or ideology doesn't conflict with mine. Mm-hmm. So I think what becomes important, particularly when you're collaborating, is that you lean into the uncomfortable space. So when you're interviewing somebody to be a designer, or you're auditioning someone to be an actor, you're leaning into what feels uncomfortable, because the thing that feels uncomfortable may be that representation, that diverse voice, that thing that you need in the room that's going to help you to catch those blind spots that you can't possibly see for yourself. So I think that's, and I think that that's a larger conversation. As I just moved into a new neighborhood, I'm noticing in the neighborhood, my neighbors are very diverse. And so it's going to be encompassing on all of us to lean into each other, particularly where we feel uncomfortable, so that we can learn and grow from each other and see our common, the things that we have in common, and then embrace those things that, that separate us in terms of differences. But even though we're still, we're one neighborhood, just one people, but thank God that there's different spices and different seasonings in the kitchen cupboard, because that's what makes that thing taste so good.
You're right. I absolutely agree with you. And thanks for bringing that perspective. Again, that idea of oneness there as well. As an accomplished playwright, can you share what tools aspiring playwrights and actors should sharpen daily?
Okay, so if you're an actor, then you definitely, you have your instrument, and that's your voice, your body, and your imagination. And you really do want to exercise those things every day. You want to, in terms of like my voice, even a simple thing like making sure that you're reading something every day and you're reading it aloud, doing vocal warm-ups, even when you're, you can be humming while you're brushing your teeth, or you can be singing while you're in the shower. Things that you do on a regular daily basis, you can incorporate your voice into that. I think exercise and stretching and things like yoga, those things are vital for your body, to keep your body fine-tuned, because that is the instrument of communication that you have to work with when you're on stage or film. And also you want to keep that imagination flowing, and imagination can flow by exposing yourself to new and different things. Art certainly can help you do that. Looking at other mediums of art can do that, but engaging in conversations and reading, reading books that open up your mind, and exploring new places, going on adventures that give you an opportunity to see and experience people, places, and things in new and different ways. Those are things that you want as an actor. As a playwright, what you want to do is you want to have a consistent writing sort of schedule. You want to write every day consistently, even if that's journaling, or that's working on a script, or that's just doing, free writing, you want to get in the habit of writing. Also, as a playwright or any writer in any particular genre, you need to be reading that genre all the time. So if you're a playwright, you should be reading theater scripts all the time. If you're going to write children's books, you should read children's books all the time, because those are ways that can continue to help sharpen your own skills, to see what your colleagues are doing out there, that they may be doing better than you, or that they may be doing worse, because you can also learn from that. So you always want to just have yourself in that mode of working your instrument, because you shouldn't be an artist that just sort of turns it off and on. It should be, that faucet should be running all the time, even if it's just a drip, so that you're continually exercising, continually moving in that creative energy.
I love that. In that same vein, it's kind of like you're always a student. You're always in the mode to learn, and you've never arrived at a destination, right? You're always pushing yourself and challenging yourself to move forward. So I love that idea. It reminds me of our time together in class when you were telling us about those things and how that we can improve and grow as an artist. So I appreciate that. Speaking of reading, especially as a playwright, which playwrights are you following and why?
There's this, I call him a young man. He may not necessarily consider himself that, but there's a playwright out there. His name is Marcus Gardley. I love his work. The last play that I saw of his was an off-Broadway play called The House That Shall Not Stand. It was based in New Orleans, sort of at the cusp of the Louisiana Purchase. This guy is a great writer. He loves to infuse sort of like magical realism into his plays that can be centered with Southern Black Christian, that type of aesthetic. And you can tell that he is operating on a spiritual plane and a spiritual plateau that infuses his work. So I really am a fan of his work. And so if I'm wanting to feel inspired, then I will more than likely go and pick up one of his plays.
I love that. Love it. Thank you so much for that inspiration. I know that you always have something that you're working on, always something in your back pocket. Share with us what you're working on now. What projects can we be on the lookout for?
I have been more in tune with, particularly since the pandemic, this concern about our next generation children, and particularly about Black children, and I'll say it because of this. When I was in graduate school, I learned how to rid myself of my Southern accent when necessary, though I embrace it now completely. But I went to school to learn voice training, lexic training, to rid myself of my Southern accent. I learned Alexander technique to, in many ways, align my body in ways so that I can move on stage that removes my natural flow, my natural aesthetic. And then what's so funny is that after you do all of this voice training and body training, and you learn Shakespeare and the classics, then you move to New York and you try to begin to audition. And what you find is that whenever a play that really speaks to your spirit, that is authentically Black, you find that those things that you left on the floor in graduate school to learn all these new things, you find that those things are now harder to pick back up. And so then people start auditioning. They create what they call open auditions, because now they go out into, they leave the theater world, the theater actors, because the theater actors are too overly trained, and they go out into the world to find the raw talent, because that's what they're looking for. So then basically what I'm saying is I go to school to put on an aesthetic that's not my own, right? Mm-hmm. And then I go out into the workforce to try to use that aesthetic, and I can't even get the job of the play that I really want to be in that does speak to my aesthetic. Mm-hmm. So that happens often, I think, where you see actors of color have lost a sense of their own natural rhythm, their own natural sensibility that they bring to the table in its rawness. That
Mhm.
and so what has been interesting to me during the pandemic is I've been thinking so much about children, and I'm sure you know that I'm a managing director of a youth theater in Tallahassee, Florida, called the Irene C. Edmonds Youth Theater, and we do a show with them every summer. We
Mhm.
haven't been able to do a show for the last 2 summers because of the pandemic. And so, but I've been thinking about them a lot because one of the things that I realized that we do there without me even knowing it was that those Black children, those African American children, we train them in the art of dance and music and voice. We train them in those, but we use our own natural aesthetic. We use drums and stepping, and we use hip hop and rap. We use our own aesthetic so that when these children approach theater and approach dance, they're not approaching it as if they have to put on some garment that doesn't quite fit right on their body, or that's
Mhm.
going to fit very differently on their body. They can approach it the same way that a child who is Caucasian
Mhm.
can be able to approach theater without having to readjust their entire aesthetic. And I think that it's important that for our next generation, and in this time when we're talking about, you know, Black Lives Matter
Mhm.
and creating a more anti-racist society, we
Mhm.
need to embrace the aesthetics of different cultures. You know, um, I love to go to an authentic Greek restaurant or an authentic Italian restaurant. Um, and so sometimes as a Black person, there's a conversation of get rid of the Black and become more American.
Mm.
But I would never tell a Greek American to get rid of the Greek.
Right.
Never tell an Italian American to get rid of that Italian. I would
Mhm.
never tell, an Asian American to get rid of that. I mean, we don't go to a nice Chinese restaurant for them to Americanize it. We want authentic Chinese food. You know, we want authentic dim sum. We want the authentic thing. And I think that we need to figure out ways that once again embrace our own aesthetic, because there are projects and films and theater and shows that do show that, but
Right.
we're not training that way. We're not
Mhm.
training our young people or people who are in high school or undergraduate college or graduate school. We're not training them in their aesthetic. We're trying to put on something else.
Mhm.
And for all of the Shakespeare and the Greek classics that I learned, I did one Shakespearean play in my entire professional career, and that's all nice and good, right? But then,
Mhm.
but if you look at the work of Intozaki Shange and you look at the language there, that language is heightened language, but you have to use your aesthetic. August Wilson's language is rhythmic and heightened, but you have to still apply a Black aesthetic to that to really sort of put yourself in it so that it's authentic and it's not just counting the rhythm of like an iambic pentameter like you would do with Shakespeare. And so I've been more so trying to figure out how can I continue to create space and work for a younger generation of African American children
Mhm.
to give them a theatrical experience that speaks to their aesthetic, because I think that is what will show them even more so how who they are matters, and what they bring to the table is
Right.
important, and it's good, and it's whole, and it's needed, and it's necessary.
Absolutely. I mean, I can just take a fork right now and eat everything that you just said. It was so rich. It was so fulling. It was so good.
Thank you.
You've always taught us to bring our authentic selves into a moment, right? Bring your authentic self to this work. That's one thing that sticks with me from your classes. And you just described that, right? Bringing your authentic self. But how can you speak to those artists, kind of like yourself, that have been trained to take that off? How can you now speak to that same artist Can you give them some tools or some advice on how they could bring their authentic self back into this space when they're auditioning and trying to land these big roles?
Yeah, we have to heal from that. I think that is something we have to heal from. We have to go back and look at all of those BFA and MFA actors who trained in a particular way that removed themselves. Like that runner, she's on her way to the Olympics. She's like the big talk of the news now. Her hair is like red or orange.
Yes.
And she's like unapologetically Black, right? Now let's say we make the story of her life. You're not going to get probably the typical MFA actor who has been trained and has removed all of their, that rich cultural Blackness. And now they speak in the King's English. You're not going to get that person that's going to play that role. You're just not going to get that person to be able to portray that woman authentically. They're going to go out and try to find some raw talent. That's what they're going to go out and do. They're going to go out and try and find a rapper or somebody who has a name, but is not going to be necessarily an actor. That's what they're going to try to go out and do to play that role. And that's very, very unfortunate. We need to heal from that, because what you're saying to a child or anybody of color who is now approaching theater, that when you say that your voice with your accent, your voice with all of these, things with your body, the alignment of your body, when you say that is wrong and it needs to be corrected, you're essentially saying to that person that you are wrong, you're not good enough, you need to be corrected. And that's some harsh language to the soul. And so we need to heal from that. And it doesn't mean that we can't learn new things. So I'm not saying not add to.
Right.
But that was not, when I was in school, that was not the message that was being sent to me. It was not the message of adding to. The message was, you are in an interview right now with somebody. You need to speak a certain way. And the way that you normally speak is not appropriate. Right. So I was being told to replace the way I speak with this new thing that they were teaching me. And that is something that that generation has to heal from. And we learned it not only from teachers who are not of our aesthetic, we learned it from our own teachers who also taught that same thing, because that's what we thought was the right thing to do. But I think more and more now we need to embrace the differences in diversity, knowing that by embracing all of that, it's still one big old pot, and that just adds some flavor. I mean, when you sit there and look at TikTok and you look at all of these videos, because I'm a TikTok junkie, I love TikTok.
Love it. Guilty.
And you see so many people who are just so fascinated by our culture. They are fascinated by it. They want our rhythms. They want our hair. They want our body. They're fascinated by it. And so why can't we be? And why can't that be taught in school? Why can't who you are and that richness in that culture be embraced and put out there on display? And then it's sort of like, my first language is English. Then I can say, you know what? I'm also interested in learning French, but it doesn't mean that when I learn French, that it replaces my English. It just adds to. So we need to make sure we have that kind of conversation, and we need to heal from that.
Healing. Ladies and gentlemen, James Webb, if you don't mind me saying, Dr. James Webb, this whole moment, this whole conversation, I think has been one of healing for me. And I certainly am sure that our audience feels that as well. Thank you so much for being on the show today. I appreciate your thoughtfulness and everything that you've brought to this table today. So thank you so much. Humbled to have you on the show. Can you tell us where we can find you on social media? Where can we stay connected with you?
Definitely connect with me on Instagram. I think that's probably the social media app that I'm most on. I don't post a lot, but that's a great way to connect with me, and that's at James Webb Online.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, James. And ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us for The Conversation. Stay connected with the VLG Productions community on social media. We'll see you next time.